Here we have the northern side of the Kremlin walls and Alexandrovsky Sad. There we have a retail centre, McDonald's. And now we have the main entrance, I would say, into Red Square from the north. The statue of Zhukov. And here we have the memorial on the northern wall to the Second World War, 1941 and 1945. They've got the dates wrong, of course, because this is well known. The Soviet Union actually attacked Poland on the 17th of September 1939. It then followed it with attacks on Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, which were completely occupied. Finland 1939, the Baltic states occupied 1940, although effectively it had large amounts of Soviet troops in there. Romania in the summer of 1940 lost Bessarabia and Bukovina, part of which had been in Austria before the First World War, so there was no claim on it whatsoever from the Soviet Union as being part of the Russian Empire. Nonetheless, we cannot forget the huge amount of Soviet losses, not just military, but one thing that's often forgotten is the amount of Soviet citizens who died of starvation because of the deliberate Nazi policies towards them. Many of these victims also due to Stalin's gross stupidity. And here we have some of the hero cities of the Soviet Union, not all of them incidentally being part of the Soviet Union when the war started on the 1st of September 1939, as we shall see. Leningrad, which was besieged from late 41 until the beginning of 1944, and particularly in the first winter of the war, terrible losses, civilian losses. Kiev, which is now the capital of the Ukraine, captured in September 1941 in a pocket which enclosed around 650,000 people, soldiers. Another gross stupidity of Stalin's. When the Soviet General Kirpinos was asked by General Guderian why he hadn't retreated, he said he couldn't. He wasn't allowed to. And the German troops, the pocket itself was about 150 kilometers deep. Incredibly stupid of Stalin. Minsk was captured by the Nazis in July 1941. It was retaken in 1944 in the Bagration attacks. I forgot to mention that Kiev was retaken in the summer of 1943. Another large pocket. There was a ghetto there. In one of my films you can see the story of Arkady Weisspapier, who was he escaped from the Soviet War death camp in October 1943, but he was in Minsk for some time, as can be heard. Stalingrad, a battle which took 1 million lives, many of them civilian, which is another thing which is often forgotten. The fate of the Soviet civilians who were in the Kessel, the cauldron, the pocket, after it was surrounded. I mean, the German troops had next to no food, and the Soviets certainly had none at all. Sevastopol was captured in the summer of 1942, having withstood a siege which had lasted for some time, captured by Manstein's troops. Manstein is better known as a tank commander, though in this case he was really, he had no tanks, they'd all been taken from him. He was an infantry attack using very heavy guns. The second siege took place in 1944. This time it was the Germans were being besieged, and again, stupidity of the leadership, this time Hitler not allowing an evacuation until it was far too late, thinking that Sevastopol could hold on, that if Sevastopol fell, then Romania would capitulate. Romania did capitulate, but not because of the loss of Sevastopol. Not so far from Sevastopol is Odessa. In fact, from Odessa, the troops were evacuated. Odessa held out in a very long siege, lasting 3 months, though it finally fell in November 1941, with the last defenders being evacuated to Sevastopol, and people from Sevastopol themselves, some were actually evacuated to Novorossisk. Very few. Now, Kerchь. Kerchь is on the Kerchь Peninsula, on the Black Sea. And Kerchь was captured in 1942, and it was held. Hitler had this idea of holding on to Kerchь as a thing you could return in the Caucasus, which turned out to be impossible. Novorossisk was almost entirely destroyed. It's this port on the Black Sea. It wasn't actually held by the Nazis for very long. In the summer of 1942, it was evacuated voluntarily at the beginning, January 1943, or February 43, I can't remember exactly which month it was. This is, in my opinion, the most controversial in many ways. Brest-Litovsk was part of Poland. It was captured by the Nazis on around the 10th of September, or 12th September 1939, something like that. It was then handed over by the Nazis to the Soviets. It's on the eastern side of the Buga River. The western side is in fact now called Sevastopol, and Brest is in Belarus. And the fortresses at Brest were very tough to capture. I mean, Guderian wrote in his memoirs how tough it has been to capture from the Poles, and he said now they're going to be much tougher from the Soviets. And despite the fact that they were attacked on the first day, they held out for a very long time. And even after the capture, the Soviets didn't actually give up fighting there until middle of July 1941. And the troops there, despite no hope whatsoever, kept on fighting. This to me, it's not very well known. It's something where some Soviet commentators criticised the Nazis for hanging out in Stalingrad, but in Brest they put forward the point, well, why did they hang out in Brest for so long? Because it was totally hopeless, but they did. Tula was surrounded, almost entirely surrounded by Guderian in 1941, in November 1941. It wasn't actually captured at all, despite being surrounded, and the German attacking forces were undoubtedly too weak, and it was cleared. The siege was broken around the 10th of December 1941. Murmansk was very close to the German-occupied Norway and Finland. It was bombed, or houses were mainly out of wood, and it was the main port of receiving British supplies, Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. And I knew somebody who actually was the liaison officer there for the Soviets during the war, and he's described the bombing and all the rest of it, because it was very close, which was, there's very little that could be actually done about it. The attacks made on Murmansk, there was some Germans, about 800 Finns, but they never really got close. And finally Smolensk, which was captured in July 1941 and retaken in 1943. Getting a feels way, that was nice to stop. And Smolensk, very close to the Katyn forest, where the Soviets butchered a very large number of Polish officers. Smolensk itself, Guderian writes about the capture of Smolensk in his book. There certainly was quite a lot of damage done there, and large amounts of prisoners, as in many cases in these 1941 battles were taken there. Then we have the hero cities of the Soviet Union. Most of them are still in Russian, but as can be seen, not all of them. Minsk in Belarus, Kiev, Odessa, Sevastopol and Breść, which is in Belarus. It is in Ukraine.